So I've had my first topic request, and I'm excited about that. That's cool. And it's something I can kind of talk about. I've already formalized some kind of thoughts on this, so it's on sin. Off the top of the hat, I'll say sin, I think, is Latin close for something like apple. And that's why the original fruit was considered to be something like an apple, because it was sin. I think that's just an arbitrary fact about the word sin, that it's Latin for apple. The reason an apple was originally a sin was because the Garden of Eden was self-abundant and had everything that was completely catered for. You didn't need to eat per se. There was no requirement to eat. That's only an example, like a really stripped back example. It probably was sexual, but you don't need to eat was the wonderful thing about it. And they ate just for the sake of the privilege of the comfort of eating. The apple is tasty, you know, it's nice, it's pleasant to eat a fruit. And because they took that little bit extra, like infinity plus one, it weighed down and fell and divided, or whatever the fall occurred through that. So that's also some off the top Genesis notions on sin. I didn't even want to talk about that. That's just some things off the top. Why is an apple, or why apple is related to use as a metaphor in Genesis for sin. I think it was something more sexual than it was. I think like the serpent went up Eve's leg and aroused her for the first time, and she was never aroused, and she turned around to Adam and said, do you feel this kind of buzz too? And he got a bit horny too, and they started having kids, or spilled seed, or did something like that, and there was a fall. Stars united or something, but then there was going to be division because they said it's going to be anonymity from there. And this is what's interesting about it: from henceforth to be anonymity, and there'd be birth pangs. I bother crows a lot. Wink wink. That's QPL in my red shirt. I bother the crows. But it's interesting anyway, the fall, that I'm mentioning that notion, because it came from a point of singularity or duality to multiplicity. And that's exactly where I determined that all sin actually come from, is multiplicity. That if there was only one person, that it wouldn't be sufficient of any other sin except pride. This is where I think of sin here. This is a menorah. It's like a Jewish harp, and they illuminate it. And this is a shadow of it, crudely drawn. But this one pole here that continues there and still goes through there, that main one is pride. And it can be considered vanity, but it's a virtue and it's a vice. It's a direct connection between the two. And all of these vices are multiplicities and ill-dignifications of original virtues, which God held in itself. So these kind of things are like fortitude, temperance, justice, I can't remember them all. Priests determine them as like chastity, poverty, and piety. But they're, again, in explanation even of, there's another shadow, probably a lightful shadow, of they're like humans trying to do something that God did, but God wouldn't be chaste or live in poverty, because God is all, you know. So these are humans trying to live like God, and they live in poverty, chastity, and piety, where they're closer to fortitude, temperance, and prudence, I'd imagine. Their virtues, and the seven deadly sins as you know them, the one of them, pride, is vanity. I'm pretty sure that's the same thing. So that's the ill-dignification of pride. So pride is actually a good thing, but the ill-dignification of pride is vanity. And even that, does vanity, I think vanity is kind of, I'm not sure if it's pride or vanity, because I think that's only capable through the reflection of other people. So that comes around in multiplicity as well. They all should come through the multiplicity of people, is what I'm saying, is that every deadly sin relies on multiple people to exist. Sloth isn't actually about being lazy, it's depending on others to do the work for you. So slavery systems are sloth-like, and that's not considered good because there's dominion held in there, and the people become godly and are commanding others. When you give up your free will to a person, or you say you give up even more to this, you give up your confessions to someone, you bestow a lot of power in them, a lot of godly power, and that's why the Catholic Church have you confessing all the time, and that's why you do it, is to give a man power, and he's supposed to be a good man for your sake. So sloth is multiple. What other sins have we got? Wrath, you need wrath to impose on somebody else. Vengeance. Sloth, as I said. What's the other ones? Just lust. See, these are all multiple. It all takes multiplicity of beings for sin to generate. So it's like shadows that get generated from beings being originally in the first place. So it's interesting that the fall came from maybe something like 2 creatures that lived without these kind of things, and then they birthed many things, multiplicity divided things, and then that's where all the shadows and things came from. What's multiplicity? I think that's in a very short nutshell, about 5-minute video, a 5-minute bombshell, everything I know about, or what I know about sin, Qabilistically speaking. Shadows really of original virtues that God held in itself, and it's difficult to imagine, but I invite you to imagine virtues in themselves. If, say, for example, wrath, there's a notion that Gabura, the right shoulder, crow, chronological sephira, has to do with severity, and people think that being severe or imposing wrath or being severe is in some way godly, and rich men do this a lot, and I've seen this in bad Qabilistic cards, that they suggest that severity is imposing wrath or dominion upon others, where God wouldn't have had anything other separated from itself to impose upon, so it could only be self-severity, like penance, not penance, but like being tough on yourself, keeping yourself in check, keeping yourself in line, which is a fortitude. So again, that notion of wrath is a shadow of fortitude, the virtue of fortitude. I can't remember explicitly what the 7 sins or 7 virtues are at this moment, actually. I know, but the main one was pride. Pride runs down through the centre of them, and that runs as a good thing, and the bad thing, it shares a common slope. If you imagine me speaking mathematically, they share a similarity or function. And that similarity or function is one that runs through. That's why it's like a shadow of a menorah. Beautiful Judaic poetry as it is. I always think that's where a Jew comes from, is lumen. A Jew, it means lumen, illuminate. Jew, lumen. But yeah. I'm not Jewish. I'm Catholic. It's just, you'd have to know where you came from, and they asked if you do that, which is good to know where you came from. And then where they came from, where everybody came from, goes back to a gory shit. But yep, that's my bombshell on sin. Any questions, ask, and I'll annotate if needs be.